Coming up on Makosi today.
Do all men cheat?
I think all men think about it. I think all men get the opportunity.
What makes you think you understand women? What makes you think you understand us?
Understanding the way women think is largely starts from understanding how you think as a man.
Season 2 is packed with special episodes. We have a book club with Makosi today, and usually I do the reviews. How special are you today that I'm actually bringing you an author to review his own book? Don't go away.
Commonly referred to as the Sixth Pastor, Pastor Ivan Mawarire has gained prolific popularity around Harare following the release of his new book, What He Wants. In it, Pastor Ivan addresses the needs and issues most men don't naturally open up about. In broaching topics that range from romance to sex, security and respect, Pastor Ivan aims to help women better understand their husbands. In 2005, Pastor Ivan introduced a series called The Sex Files to a local youth group he was ministering to. This youth program's attendance skyrocketed from 50 to 2,500. Pastor Ivan continues to bring awareness and insight on the taboos surrounding the subject of sex and sexuality by creating platforms to discuss such topics. He is often requested to speak at premarital festivities. Pastor Ivan has a couple more projects in the works, including a follow-up book called What She Needs, which is targeted to men wanting to learn more about what their wives want. But Pastor Ivan says that the one thing all his projects have in common is that they are directed at encouraging the human spirit.
Dr. Ivan Mawarire.
I like that, doctor.
And you are Dr. Love now. So I'm going to start off by asking you, do all men cheat?
The question is often asked because of what women kind of feel generally. There's that whole statement, all men are dogs. And I'd like to say that I don't think all men cheat.
Right.
But I think all men think about it. I think all men get the opportunity to be with somebody else, and at that point you have to make the decision whether I'm going to do it or not. And you know, part of what happens is that, especially when you're in marriage and you have a problem with your wife, with an argument, misunderstanding of some sort, what tends to happen is that you start to look for support elsewhere. And slowly but surely you can get sucked into a relationship sometimes without knowing it. But I think that there is a group of men that do get out there to cheat. I mean, for them it's part of being a bachelor, and it's the failure to graduate from being a bachelor to being a husband that causes a lot of men to cheat.
Does a perfect marriage exist?
No. The perfectness of a marriage is in the fact that two imperfect people decide to put up with each other.
I've always thought there is no such thing as a person who understands a woman. What makes you think you understand women? What makes you think you understand us?
Good question, because every day when I interact with my wife, I don't understand. But I think there is a certain level of insight that you can have. And this is the problem with most men. We are not prepared to learn just the little there is, just to help us get by with women. All right, we would rather they understand us and we just kind of sail along. And why I have kind of understood, I've taken time to just study the way women think and the way they view certain things in terms of marriage, in terms of men and so forth. And it helps just to understanding the way women think is largely starts from understanding how you think as a man.
Right.
I think I've taken time to understand how I think as a man, how my fellow compadres think as men, and then from there we start to see the fact that this makes women mad. They don't like it. Why don't they like this? And so I kind of investigate that a little bit more, and that's helped me to understand women a little bit more.
They call you the sex pastor.
Oh my gosh, and I'm trying to shake that title off.
No, but how are you going to shake that title off, yet you talk a lot about sex?
You know what has happened? I talk about marriage and relationships.
Right.
But people are so interested in the sexual aspect. Like whenever I do
think
talks,
so?
well, the thing is this: whenever I do talks, that is the subject that we spend at least 3/4 of the time on.
Right.
Like for example, I've been doing a lot of talks with at bridal showers and you know, kitchen teas, which is a bit strange for a man to speak, but I think it's the right thing to do. When I speak there, we go through the issues. You know, he says, I need your respect. He says, you know, these are the things I fear the most. You know, he says you know, the way you look is important. Don't nag. And then we start talking about sex. And suddenly the whole place lights up.
Right.
And the whole time it's always about sex.
Why do you think so?
Well, I think it's a neglected area.
Right.
It's something that we don't talk about openly in our society. Church doesn't talk about it openly. When the rest of society, the world, talks about it, it's always so-and-so got caught cheating, so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that. And nobody's talking about, can you talk to me about me and my husband and our relationship? This is what I think. This is what he's saying. This is what I'm saying. This is what he's asking for. Big issues that we've been talking about, especially with, you know, with Christians, is the issues to do with oral sex and you know, how much is too much, and these are questions that the church is not answering.
Coming up after the break.
Is oral sex demonic? Would you say sex is spiritual?
Definitely, it is absolutely spiritual.
Is oral sex demonic?
I think it's a perversion. More than calling it demonic, I think we get a better understanding when we understand that it is a perversion of the original intent for sex.
But then that's what the devil does. The devil always comes with his perverse. Like when he went into the Garden of Eden, he just perverted.
He suggested a variation of the truth, didn't
Yes.
he? The same thing with sex is that we can call it demonic, but I like to call it a perversion because it gives you an understanding now, where it becomes a twisted experience of the real thing.
Right.
Because sex, by the way, is the highest level of intimacy between two human beings. It's the highest level of intimacy. So it's important that it is done in a way that is both satisfying for both parties and pleasurable for both parties. And you find that when you go into your relationship and you demand sex from a high position of selfishness, you are possibly going to cause a lot of pain and a lot of degradation to your partner. Okay? But when you come from a position of selflessness, you're possibly going to give a lot of pleasure and satisfaction to your partner and for yourself as well.
Would you say sex is spiritual?
Definitely, it is absolutely spiritual. I mean, the Bible, 1 Corinthians, if you go into 1 Corinthians, around about chapter 6, chapter 7, the Bible writes and says this: he who joins himself to a prostitute becomes one with her in spirit. It is the one thing that joins two people spiritually.
And
in
there's soul ties.
Exactly. In the same way that we are joined with God spiritually when we are born again, you are joined spiritually to a person when you have sex with them. One of the biggest questions young people ask me is, what is a soul tie? I'm being told don't do this because it's a soul tie. Let me give you a very brief explanation. The Bible says again in 1 Corinthians, don't you know that you are the temple of the Holy Spirit?
Right.
And when the Bible speaks metaphorically, we've got to study the metaphor. Now when you go back to Exodus chapter 40 all the way to about chapter 45, the Bible talks about the temple in the Old Testament.
Right.
And the way the temple used to work was that people came to the temple and interacted with the temple based on who they were. If you were just a general Israelite, you interacted with the temple on the outer court.
Right.
If you were a priest, you could go further into the inner court. If you were the high priest who was on duty, you could go into the Holy of Holies, which is the most intimate place, the most holy place. It's the same thing with you and I. People interact with us based on who they are, and they are allowed to touch certain things based on their relationship to us.
I like that.
When the wrong person touches the wrong piece of furniture in the temple in Exodus chapter 40 and 45, they would die. It's the same thing with us. When people come into our lives and they get intimate with us in spaces where they are not allowed, they don't have the qualification or the relationship to allow them to touch the most holy place, a spiritual death takes place.
Right.
That's what a soul tie is.
Okay.
And so as people then begin to grow in their physical lives, you still carry within you these people that came in, touched the wrong thing. The law of the temple applied to you because 1 Corinthians says you are the temple.
Right.
And they died literally in there. And so you're walking around with hordes of dead people within you. And sometimes you find out that somebody, their life is in order, right? But they don't seem to get married. They'll get into a relationship, it'll go for 6 months, it'll go for a year, and then they start to talk about marriage and the guy just backs away. Spiritually, what happened is that he was trying to progress as the high priest into the most intimate space, but it's clogged up. He can't get in. There's a lot of dead bodies that are there, and there's no more space for the high priest to come in and do what he needs to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So into your camera, that one, I would like you to talk to the Christian man or woman who gets married solely to have sex.
One of the biggest disappointments that husbands and wives have when they get into marriage is to discover that sex is not what they thought it would be when they got in. They themselves do not have a certain control. They break their own vow to themselves first in the marriage. They find that they start to break vows to their wives or to their husbands without even thinking about it. And so what I would like to say here is this: we don't start to prepare for marriage 1 week before the marriage comes or a month before the marriage comes, but we start to prepare for marriage even before we find the man or before we find the woman that we believe we're going to marry. We start to become faithful to them before they show up, because faithfulness begins with being faithful to ourselves, being faithful to our values, being faithful to our dreams. And when somebody walks into our lives, it's going to be easy to be faithful to them because you're used to it, because it's something that you know how to do.
Touché!
Coming up after the break.
Tell me the 10 things every husband
Desperately what?
wants his wife to know. He's desperate about this. You've come up with this book. So just break it down to me. Tell me the 10 things every husband desperately
what?
wants his wife to know. He's desperate about this.
To be honest with you, it is desperation. And I'll tell you why it's desperation. We don't open up as men. We're almost afraid of being expressive. Because see, the thing about being expressive is that it opens you up and someone begins to know you for who you are. We don't want to be vulnerable. That's one big thing that men don't like. The 10 things that you're talking about, the first one that he says, sweetheart, I really wish you would know. He says, I need your respect. Now, the way the book is written, Makosi, is that this husband has written 10 memos or 10 little letters to his wife. So the first one, he says, I need your respect. I need your respect. Again, when women hear respect, they cringe and they bring out the spears. What respect do you people want? What kind of respect am I talking about? I'm not talking about getting on your knees. If we're in Africa, you know, that's what men are used to. Different cultures, you know, women have to be subservient. And so he says, no, that's what I'm talking about. So I'm talking about the fact that if I'm having a conversation with you, we are not agreeing on something, we're having an argument, let me finish speaking. Don't cut in on me. Let me finish making my point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He says, don't call me names when we're talking about it. Like, you know, you're such a fool. Like, you know, this decision, only an idiot makes a decision like that.
At your age. Men get very sensitive.
Man, you nailed it. And he's just saying, sweetheart, come on, as the head of my own home, I want to know that the woman that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with still holds me in high esteem.
Right.
Even if she sees my stupidest of decisions. And he's saying, sweetheart, even if we've had a fight, even if I made a stupid decision, when we're with people, hold me in high esteem.
Right.
Because I that way I know you respect me. Then he says, I want to be your romance hero. You know, men, this is the one thing we crave with our women. We want you to think we're Superman. You know what I mean?
Right. So is it important for me to tell you that?
He says, when I have tried to romance you, I want to hear that.
Right.
You know, I want to hear the feedback.
Okay.
I want to hear you say, sweetheart, that was amazing. And in fact, in the book, he writes and he says, even if you've seen it on TV before, you know I copied it from TV. And I didn't do it as well as it was done on TV.
Exactly.
He says, just appreciate it because it makes me want to do more. Because remember, this is a vulnerable area. He's afraid that if he does it wrong, you're going to get him and say, really?
Yeah.
What the heck is all this? And he's saying, be impressed with me when I try to romance you, because it means the world to me and it makes me want to do more. Number 3, he says, I long for you to initiate sex. This is a big one.
No, but we are brought up not to do that.
But this is where the problem is. This is where the problem is, because you're brought up not to do it. And my problem as a man is that each time I initiate sex with you and you say no, I feel like a repeat sex offender. I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I feel like I'm abusing you. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he's saying, look, I'm not saying initiate sex every single day, because for a man, to be honest, that gets a little bit uncomfortable if she initiates sex every single day.
Yeah.
Men want to be in control of their sexual experience. That's just how men are.
Yeah.
He's saying, look, every now and again, surprise me. Show me that you are interested in this thing.
Okay.
Show me that this is not abuse. You know, like each time I come and say, hey, sweets, can we? And you're like, again?
Yeah.
He says that doesn't help.
Having said that, I find that a lot of African women, I have not experienced it in the West, but a lot of African women use sex to control their men.
Yes.
And that's a bad thing.
That's a bad thing. It's actually a very unfortunate thing because of the result. One of the things we found, and I write about it in the book, but the way a man thinks is that when he needs sex and it is not provided, he's gonna find a way for that need to be met. All right. And so I've said to women before, whilst you may get your way by using sex as a way to get him to do what you want, you may shoot yourself in the foot.
Right.
Because suddenly he may now become totally uninterested anyway. And that whole thing becomes a turnoff because he's getting it elsewhere. So number 5, for men are visual.
Right.
He says, sweetheart, when you are dressing yourself, don't dress only for other people, dress for me as well.
Right.
And I think a lot of men have had the problem of watching their wives dress up to go off to a party, go to the shops, go to church. But when they're with him, they just don't seem to make an effort.
Right.
For example, she'll go to bed, and I don't know if this happens anywhere else in the world, but I certainly know that in Africa it happens.
Oh, yes.
She goes to bed and she takes one of her stockings that she has laddered and
She rips it.
and oh man.
Oh, that's not good.
Oh, and
But how do we look after our hair?
and what he doesn't understand, that he's looking at it and he's thinking, why are you putting on that thing on your head?
So like when you fall asleep, I can go and maybe.
Well, yeah, I think part of what he's saying is he's saying not every day.
Right.
You know what I mean? He says, look, I understand you've got to look after your hair and everything, but he says, you know, when we go to bed, for me, bedtime is also action time, and I want you to look good. And he's saying, I'm not saying put on Victoria's Secrets every single night. And he's saying, sweetheart, I want to be able to associate lingerie not with the model in the magazine, but with the model in my house. You're my model.
Sex itself is a taboo in some parts of Africa, but what taboo issues do you address in the book?
In the book, there's a need that he talks about. He says, I long for adventurous and spontaneous sex.
Right.
Now, one of the biggest taboos that women seem to have a problem with, especially in Africa again, is the issue of what we call a quickie. Okay?
Right.
Even Christians will call a quickie demonic. They'll be like, that's demonic. And I said, why? No, why? It's not demonic. If a husband said to his wife, sweetheart, we're both at work. I'm at my office, she's at her office. And he calls up and says, hey, listen, I've just booked a room at the hotel in town. Do you want to meet me over there for lunch? Let's get it on for an hour real quick and we go back to work. There's nothing wrong with that.
As long as you're married.
As long as you're married, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that we associate sexual intimacy in hotels with prostitutes and cheating.
Right.
And so most wives, especially wives, they're like, never. I'm not gonna have sex with him in a hotel at 12 midday. Why should I do that? And he's saying, sweetheart, come on. This is what keeps this thing going. This is the spark that I'm looking for. It's pleasure. Let's not only in the bedroom. If the kids have gone to bed, or if you don't have kids yet, on the couch. Why not?
Why did you write this book?
First and foremost, and you know, my wife helped me write the book, you know what I mean, because I gave her to look at it and she gave me her first thoughts. And I can never run away from the fact that, first of all, it was a personal experience. And I said to my wife, I'm writing this book not just for other men, but because I also am a man and I am married. And she gives me my first comment in the book, actually. She says, this has to be likely the most infuriating, touching, annoying, heartwarming and instructive book I've read. A lot like marriage, it definitely made me stop, think and reconsider a lot of things I've taken for granted or brushed aside. So I wrote the book because each time we talked with men and with friends of mine, we seemed to express very well to each other what she didn't understand about us. But we weren't talking to the wives about what they didn't understand. So I thought, listen, let's put this in a book and let's see what the response has been. And of course, the response has been beyond what I expected.
To balance it, are you going to do a what she wants?
100%. So we've started working on that, and of course, the women are waiting for that.
Well, it's lovely that we just crave and you guys are desperate.
You guys just crave. Again, you find that it's what he wants
Right.
and there's what she needs. In this book, you find that I think about 60 or 70% of the issues are sexual.
Right.
And in the book, What She Needs, which is out in about a month or so, you find that about 10% of the issues are sexual.
But 90%.
90% they're emotional, they're from the heart. Already you can begin to see that, oh, this is how we are different. Maybe answer again why I wrote the book, to start the communication going in marriages.
Okay.
And I've said in the book that this may not be your husband exactly,
Right.
but at that point, if you find one that's him exactly, discuss it with
Zoom
him.
into it.
Zoom in and say, sweetheart, that's it. And if you find one that's not him,
Right.
ask him, so which one is it? If you're not that, then what are you exactly?
You know what, Pastor Even Mawarire, thank you so much for coming on to Makosi today. It's helped me, and I sincerely hope it's helped my viewers.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. So there you have it. Insight into sex. It being spiritual, soul ties with Pastor Even Mawarire. So if I were you, I'll go and get myself a copy of What He Wants. And there's no imbalance here, because as you just heard him say, a book on 4 women, What She Needs, is coming up. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other.
Next on Makosi Today.
And the next thing we were jumping over, they used to call them Mashendarine in Bari, the back alleys. Jumped over, there was a cave, boom, went. And then we just sort of disappeared off the map from my grandparents. I was 100% confident. I was in that zone, in that place. Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't worried about where I was going to sleep, what I was going to eat. I have good enough. I wasn't worried about anything. But I got caught with my pants down. Long story short.